Welcome in, everybody, to A Curious Mind, a Paper Gold podcast. I have a very odd story to share with you. Happenstance, God's curveball, what have you. But a couple weeks ago, I was sent over $600 from a man I didn't know. A month before that, I was sent $25 from a man I didn't know. But because of the book business, I knew eventually I would figure out who this man was because he would want his money back because I didn't think it was owed to me. And this is how I met Larry Moore and his fantastic story about a book we're going to talk about this afternoon. And Larry, tell everybody where you're from and tell everybody your side of the story other than me just getting money.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll condense this down as much as I can.
Yeah.
But um, I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. I'm an artist. I'm actually in my studio right now. Behind me is some of my work. Max and I were just talking about my history. I came from an illustration background, came from a graphic design background. And the reason I accidentally sent money to Max, Paper Gold, is because there's another Paper Gold publisher who's just published my grandmother's children's book, which is 100 years old, that my cousin and I spent about a year and a half bringing back to life. And so he's like, "What's this money for?" And I'm like, "Oops, wrong guy." Unfortunately, Max and his
Yeah.
partner Thomas are great people, and that's all worked out. But we've come to, I sent him a communication, Max sent you a communication with a
Yeah.
picture of my grandmother's book in it, and now the cover, which is available. And it's kind of an odd coincidence because of the nature of what you do and what you talk about.
And I just want to clarify, we did give you the money back. We haven't
Yeah.
taken the money. Um, and so let's unearth this story because it's such a wonderful story. It's such a happenstance story. And sometimes people meet like you and I met because of this mistake. And this
Yes,
was what a beautiful mistake that has happened.
that's right. Yeah. It's a
Your
weird thing, this,
yeah,
the way
your
this works.
grandmother wrote a book. Give us the approximate time, the year
Yeah.
of that, and what happened to it, and then how it got unearthed, and then once the unearthing begins, the process.
Yeah, it was so in 19 my grandmother was born. I was trying to do the math and I was looking at her life story, which is actually remarkable in and of itself. And I think she was born around 1900, as best I can tell. I don't have that exact date, but in 1929 she had two children, around 7 and 8 years old, and she decided to write and illustrate a children's book. Now, I don't know if any of you know, if you love old books and you,
Mhm.
especially the illustrated ones like Treasure Island, which I'll refer to.
Everybody watching this loves old books.
There you go. So you know that there's a high level of craft involved in producing them, doing the artwork for them, and that was my job for a billion years. And so she wrote and illustrated this children's book. It's a delightful children's book, but I didn't really come to find out about it until really recently. But she'd done the drawings and the illustrations, full paintings, and she wrote the story for why we don't know. It's the I don't know if she's trying to get it published, but she put in a lot of work on it.
Well, let me press pause here. She 1929.
Yeah.
We are now in the midst of the Great Depression.
Yes.
Where is she writing this? Give me whatever circumstance you have of her life right there and then.
Well, one thing we know is at the time she was a single mother of two.
Okay.
Dad, her husband, they went their separate ways for whatever reason. She was kind of ornery. I could see it, but that was, that's a tough time to be a single mom.
Sure.
And she, I apparently was in an English class that inspired her to take on this project. What her hopes for it were, I don't know. But I don't find out about this thing for, I think maybe my parents had said, "Oh yeah, your grandmother did this thing." And when you're 15, it's like, "Yeah, whatever, grandma." You don't think about it. But 2 years ago, my cousin calls me, and this, you'll see how circular this family story gets. My cousin called me and she said, "This book by our grandmother, I don't know if you know anything about it, but she wrote and illustrated it. and a hurricane came through. She lived in near Miami in Coral Gables.
Okay.
In 1935, this Category 4 or 5 hurricane came through and wiped out the city. And you can look that up. It's a thing. So the original art is lost, but what is saved, and I'm going to send you images later, is one copy of this hardbound book. When I say hardbound, it's plank wood with cabinet hinges and hand typed on green paper.
Where was it found? Where did your cousin locate it?
I think my grandmother managed to take that with her. Now, you have to remember in 1935, there was no early warning system for these sorts of things, right? There's a big storm hits. I don't know how she managed to get out unscathed. She saved the kids and this copy of the book and maybe a handful of other tchotchkes, but she managed to get out of there. And inset into the book are copies of the original art. Now, obviously, they're copied onto white paper. That didn't happen at the time in the 30s. There weren't copiers, so she must have had little black and white prints that she had made um, of the art just to document it, which was really smart of her to do. And so she had something to make copies from, and that's what this book is made of. And that's what my cousin sent me copies of. And I just went, my cousin wanted me to re-illustrate the book. Now, to tie up this little circular thing,
Hmm?
I'll show you in a minute, or when we get to it. The two main characters of the book are my father as a child and his sister or my aunt, right? So my grandmother writes a book featuring my father and his sister, my aunt.
Wow.
So obviously, I'm the son of my father, and so it's a grandmother, father, son thing.
Mhm.
His sister, my aunt, her daughter is the editor of the book. So the children of the children in this children's book are bringing. I spent a year not re-illustrating it, bringing it back to life because all I had were these black and white photographs
And the story.
and the story. And she wrote the story, and all we did was we edited out some words that were popular at the time but have taken on new
Okay.
meanings to
I
sort of
understand.
bring it.
Mhm.
But I really wanted to, like my cousin wanted me to re-illustrate it from scratch, and when I saw the art, which I hadn't really seen as an adult, maybe I saw it as a kid, I went, "Holy crap, this stuff is so good." It's like, and I told you this in the phone call the other day. It's like N.C. Wyeth's illustrations for, say, Treasure Island. You
Okay.
know, if as I was an illustrator,
Mhm.
N.C. Wyeth and his teacher Howard Pyle were like gods,
Yeah.
and to us. And when I saw how good they were, and there's more to that story, I went, I'm not going to redo this thing. That's silly. These are so good. And the story is really good. It's a delightful story. That I had to figure out how to bring them to reanimate them
Right.
and bring them back to life and honor and keep as much of her original work as I possibly could. So that's what I did.
So in the comparison to white, so we have soft colors, a lot of earthen tones.
Drawing ability, composition. The big thing is I show this to a lot of my artist friends now. I posted it on Facebook and whatever, and they're all like, I see a lot of Pyle school in this, and it's compositional. It's the drawing ability. And the additional thing that I found super incredible that the average person wouldn't get is all the animals are 100% accurately depicted, but anthropomorphized. They're, given sort of a human smile and happier faces and all that. But I'm like, I know for a fact you don't just pick this up one day and go, yeah, I'm going to illustrate a children's book and do it to this level. Nobody seems to know how she learned it. She never spoke about it. And when I was around her as a grandmother, she never said, I did a children's book. She never talked about it. I never saw her draw or paint again.
And your father never spoke about it?
I think my mom at the time said something about it. And we may have had that hard cut. It's sort of vaguely in my mind, but I probably saw it when I was 10 or 12, maybe. But yeah, grandma was the woman that made my father crazy. That's all I knew her as. And she would come once a year and he'd get all verklempt and keep you going. So
Now, I don't want you to give away the ending of the story, but what is the story about? What in 1929, what was she writing this book? What was the story?
yeah, okay. So the nut of the story, the a recap of the story is a young boy goes to the beach in Miami, spends his time during the summer, and he meets a crab and finds out that he can communicate, have a conversation with the crab. And the
Okay.
crab says they become friends, and he goes, "You need to meet the sea folk." Um, so the crab introduces him to Mr. Sailfish and Mr. Swordfish and Mr. Green Turtle. And so it's really ultimately it's a wonderful adventure story for a child, but it's really about appreciating nature. And she's got little charts and graphs that depict in the back where to find the animals that she's featured.
And is Miami and Florida geographically spoken about in the book?
I mean, maybe
Or
on the
just
first
mentioned?
page,
Yeah,
I
just
don't I
mentioned.
don't think she gets into that exactly, but she does allude to the fact that they're south because their cousins have to come down the train from the north, and that takes 2 days. And so there's a bit in the conversation about where he is geographically. But
And so we've unearthed the book. At what point did you say, you know what, this is such a great story? Not the story you and I are talking, the actual story. At
yeah,
what point did you say we should try to get this published?
I just realized when my cousin first contacted me about this whole thing, and she sent me the images, I just believed that it was so important
Mhm.
to bring this to life because it never had that shot when she was alive, and to honor the work and to honor her story. Um, I took the black and white illustrations, I cleaned them up in Photoshop, and then I had them transferred to watercolor paper, and then I spent because they're very complex. It spent about a year and change in the evenings hand coloring them and bringing them back to life.
Now, and I mean, cousins, aunts, and uncles. Did anybody have an inkling about any of this, or because to me this feels like a found family heirloom treasure?
It absolutely is. And the thing that's sort of ironic, I'm sad that it took this long that she didn't get to see this happen, but
Right.
before she passed. But that was like, I think that was late 1990s. The technology wasn't really there for us to do what we're doing now, which is the print on demand hardcover, and to make a book that really looked good. It's a very good looking. Amazon to give them credit. I don't know how they print one book at a time, but they do it and they do it well because I was on press as a graphic designer a billion times. I know printing and I know how difficult the process used to be.
Mhm. And so
Um,
how long of a process was it, including you touching up the paintings and the artwork?
about 2 years because then I went to a designer and I did a fundraiser, a GoFundMe fundraiser to raise money to pay him. I could have paid him myself, but I was hoping for, in fact, most of the book is paid for by my family, my brothers and my sister and my
As it should be, though.
as
I
it
mean,
should be.
yeah, of course.
So, but what it did was it got a couple of news people to go, hey, and then so I've already had two news interviews about this because it's an interesting, not just the book itself, but the whole family aspect of it.
The news you've acquired so far, are they local to you?
Local. Yeah.
So they're not local to me yet.
Not yet. But now that I have hard copies, I'm going to do a harder
I
push.
think that you and I need to do a little reaching out to the Miami Herald. I think this is a beautiful story that
That's a
Miami
great
Herald,
idea.
the Miami Herald needs to know this story.
Yeah, because you're down south.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I hadn't thought
So I
about that.
think, yeah, this will be another conversation we're gonna have.
Okay,
Yeah,
fine.
so give me give me the emotional reflection on your part the first time you read the story.
I mean, the whole thing, if I had one word, it was just utter amazement at the whole project. You can generally do one, not generally. Some people are good at one thing. You
Mhm.
can be good at drawing or you can be good at painting,
Right. And she did both.
but she did both, and she was a writer, and it's an adorable story. It's a very sweet story. It's nostalgic. We tried to honor the language and the way it's written, and it's kind of refreshing to have this sort of longer form storybook in the language that it's presented to us in, and it's not stilted. It doesn't slow you down. It's really a darling a conversation and what it is to be a child and be an imaginative child. And it is kind of a Hans Christian Andersen story because my aunt was Coral, the mermaid. So part of the story is he learned he can somehow magically breathe underwater. So he goes underwater with Mr. Swordfish and he meets Coral, the mermaid, and she introduces him to more friends. And he meets pirates. There's pirates involved. And I don't know really how she was inspired to write the story or to create it visually. And
Mhm.
my only theory that I have on it is I looked it up, and Treasure Island was published by Simon& Schuster in about 1911,
Mhm.
1913. And I don't know how much of that was in color. Uh,
Right.
uh, I, I don't know if the whole book was in color at the time or if it was like the frontispiece or I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, yeah, probably a lot of color plates. At least I would guess 30 color plates, but you probably had some black and white as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to look at the work, I'll hold up a copy of the book
Yeah.
and I'll send you images too to share. But the average person probably won't even think about it. They'll just go, "Oh, this is good." But for me to go, Grandma, where the heck did you learn how did you learn how to do this and not speak about it ever? You know?
Was she a storyteller at all?
No, nope. And she lived a remarkable life. I mean, she went,
There's more to the story here, Larry. There's way more to the story. We got to unlock her life.
yes. Oh, I
What
know.
what what made her journey so remarkable?
She as a teenager, her mother took her to Italy where she got into an opera school in Milan, and she became a young operatic star. She got a review written about her by Enrico Caruso, who was this
Oh,
famous
the
tenor,
best, the best.
the
Yeah,
best.
yeah.
And then he lauds her. The whole thing is about her. But then World War One sort of kicks up, and so they move to England, where then she gets into ballet magically. I don't know how that happens. And then things get hot over there, so she comes back to the U.S. And at a young age, because now she has these multiple language skills, she ends up joining Pershing in Paris, working for the Women's Signal Corps. She's still young. She's still very young because she spoke French, Italian, English, and something else.
She's
And
an asset. Yeah, she's an
yeah,
asset.
and so when her time was up there, then she comes back and she has a couple of young kids, but and figures out everything on her own. She was a tough bird, I'll tell you that. And after that, she ends up back in the USO and Okinawa and Korea, and she's teaching English and setting up USOs in occupied Japan and Korea.
She sounds
And
like a pioneer.
she was a pioneer. She like she was a woman for whom no was not an option. She just did stuff.
But as her grandson, did you ever get an inkling of that woman?
No. Well, I sense as much as one can at a teenage, you know how we are with our grandparents.
Yeah.
They show up old and then they go away old.
Mhm.
You never think, oh, you had a life before I knew you. I didn't,
Right.
you know, and it really made me appreciate her all the more because she never talked about it. And in doing the sort of, I guess, retouching, bringing the work back to life, I realized how amazing this ability that she just conjured up to make this thing happen. It I know personally because I've been an artist all my life. It takes a lot of training. There's a lot of time involved, and I mean it's exceedingly good for a non-professional, and it's good for an actual professional. Of which at that time there's like two female illustrators that I could find. So
Mhm.
she was just like she went for it. No one said she couldn't do it, so she did it.
She did.
Yeah.
And so nowadays, 2024, about to be 2025, what is the family talk about this book now in the family? Now that people can get their hands on it. They're now getting a glimpse or a glimmer of this woman who was their
Yeah.
blood and their lineage. What is the talk at the Thanksgiving table or
Well, we
the
all knew, like, one thing we can always have stories about her to talk about that are specifically grandma personality type stories. She was a tough woman. I wouldn't call her loving, but she had her way. And but the really fun thing for me is that now when people, because I posted on Facebook and on Instagram, because I have followers in both places, and people are buying them. They're like, "This is awesome. I'm buying one for my grandkids," and they'll buy two or three or whatever, and then they'll say, "This is a really good story. It's a great story, and it's an easy read, and it's perfect for 5 to 10 years old," and and so the conversation is like in two camps of who grandma was to us and who she is as this amazing pioneer to do this work on her own, presumably with no publisher in
oh,
mind.
yeah. Now this is not going to escape me, and I know it's not escaped you. She was an artist, and you are an artist.
Yes, that's correct.
So
So yeah, and most of my work is centered around nature. And one would say, well, that's some pretty big serendipity right there,
sure.
because I don't think it came. The funny thing is, I do remember Aunt Helen who's Coral in the book, was also an artist, and she specialized in nature.
Yeah.
So she obviously got that from directly from the source, from her mother. And but I picked it up kind of in my own way because I wasn't introduced to grandma's work that I recall
Mm-hmm.
by the time I was sort of developing as an artist. And so it's a wonderful, like, all the family parts of
Right.
grandmothers and children and their children's children, this giant loop of family
Right.
uh,
But
connectivity.
yeah, there also must have been an aha moment for you when you realized as you were doing this, "Oh my gosh, I paint nature.
Yeah,
She was doing nature."
yeah, yeah. There was, and that was, there was a lot of reasons for me to do this project, and none of them involve money. That's not what I'm doing this for. But halfway, when I started looking at the black and white illustrations, I realized how well they were done. And I also realized, like, to draw a green turtle in 1929, you're not going, you're not going on Google to look that one up. And probably wasn't a library of color plated books of sea
Right.
creatures of the Atlantic. Probably not.
I think the best bet is she may have had an Audubon book or a Darwin book or something,
Or
you
she
know.
went to the docks
Yeah,
because she
yeah.
lived in Coral Gables
And she
on the
saw,
beach.
yeah, she saw it in person when
She went and saw it in
Miami
person.
Beach was a purely nautical seaport.
Yeah. Yes. So she
So
would,
can
my
you
only
hold it
assumption
up?
is, huh?
Yeah. Can you hold it up?
Yeah, yeah. So here's the cover, and
Okay.
I
Oh, yeah.
intentionally wanted the designer to keep the time that she created the book in mind in terms of design. I didn't want to modernize it in any way, and I love books too, and I look at them from a design standpoint, and from she's got pirates,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Very, yeah, very much like NCY.
Very
Very,
much
very,
compositionally, drawing wise. Um, and the story has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and it's just a delightful, enjoyable read. The type is 16 point, so with a lot of leading. So here's another personal favorite. And if you, I looked up, I had to just to get the color right. I Googled because I had Google and she didn't. I Googled that swordfish,
right.
and I realized how accurate it was, which is really kind of remarkable. There's That's
It
hard to
makes
do.
sense though, but with her in Miami Beach, it does make sense
Yeah.
for her to have a really good glimpse of this.
Yes, because
Uh,
you could go and find probably on any given Sunday, you could go down to the docks and the commercial fishermen would hang up a big swordfish or a big
their
sailfish.
catches, yeah, they would catch them. I mean,
Yeah.
there's lots of very famous pictures of Hemingway doing that with the with
Yeah, that's
yeah,
right. And more than likely, the green turtles, which probably weren't hunted, well, they may have been at the time, but would come ashore to
the nest. Yeah.
so she comes by it all the good old fashioned hard way and did it as best I can tell just to do it.
So look at this now. You and your cousin located this nearly 100 years after its self-publication.
Yes.
You send me money by accident.
Yeah.
I happen to be a book guy,
Yes.
and look at us now. This story of hers
Yeah.
keeps giving these gifts.
Yes. Well, and there's one more layer to this, which is I'm also an author, and my
Mhm.
cousin is also an author. Except for we just write about different things.
Okay.
I write about the creative act because that was my
Mhm.
life, and
Mhm.
she writes about it's more of, s- fantasy, witchcraft kinds of books. But still, this there's so many like layers of how we're all connected, and I was unaware, at least consciously at the time when I knew her, that she did any of this stuff. But somehow it seeped into my psyche, and then now I'm like 66, so 65 years old when my cousin calls me and says, "Hey, let's look at this thing." And I went, "Holy F, that
Right.
remarkable." And so I had to do it. I just had to do it.
Yeah.
I have
I
other
I don't,
work.
yeah, I don't feel like there's only one thing you learned, because I know in speaking with you now and speaking with you previously, this is a very dense conversation we're having,
Yeah,
that it almost feels like the snowball going down the mountain, getting bigger and bigger. But can you leave our audience with the most important thing that you learned in this whole process?
I did. I mean, I can. And the thing that I learned, other than how amazing my grandmother was the people who come before us
Mhm.
and the lives that they had. And I don't know about you and your grandparents. When you're young, you meet them and they give you stuff and here's some cookies and here's a toy, and that's how you know them. You get hugs,
Mhm.
you know, you listen to their complaints about whatever thing, but to know who they are, to really know them. And once I dug into, and this is recently, dug into her story, I'm just like, holy crap. This doesn't just stop with the book. It's her entire life was a crazy self-pioneered event of
Yeah,
her.
I don't think you're done.
Yeah.
I don't think you're done with this story.
Well, I think it's a remarkable story. It's sort of a Hans Christian Andersen thing, but it's from a different point of view, and it's a completely different storyline. It's just the only similarity is there's a boy and a mermaid, and they become friends, and but that's the only similarity.
Well, I want to thank you, number one, for sending me money by mistake.
Yes, my pleasure, and thanks for sending it back. It's
Yeah, and sending it back. And I want to thank you for your time here and this beautiful, rich story of your grandmother and the woman she was before the woman you knew.
Yes. And
And
that's the lesson really is, and it could apply also to parents, you only know your parents intellectually from a certain age,
right.
maybe 20, you start going, huh? So you were a human being before I came along,
And only what they'll tell you.
and only what they'll tell you and what they don't tell you, there's a lot of stuff there. And I
Mhm.
think it's great, it's good to dig. If they don't tell you, you'll maybe dig after you can't speak with them anymore or whatever. And for your grandparents, most of our grandparents are gone and it's worth a look. I'll
Mhm.
tell you that.
And and the name of the book is
Jackie Boy and the
Jackie Boy.
Seafoam.
All
And
right.
it's available in hardcover and softcover and ebook on Amazon.
Well, I am going to personally contact the Miami Herald for this. And I already know you and I are going to be talking again about this.
Yeah,
There's something here that we're still not hitting, believe it or not. I don't know what it is yet, but
I'm there for it.
something
Yeah.
seems monumental and mountainous about this.
Yeah.
So thank you for today, though,
Thank
um,
you.
and I look forward to speaking with you again.
Pleasure, Max. Thank you so
Bye,
much for.
Larry.
All right.